Former speechwriter for President George W. Bush and American Enterprise Institute scholar. He is also a Fox News contributor and Democratic strategist Isaac Wright. It's a bizarre story, but very troubling. This is irreversible damage, I would imagine, that these people are dealing with tonight. And Mark, you feel pretty strongly about what we have ended up doing by reaching out to the Cubans and trying to, make nice.
Absolutely. Look, one of the things that Barack Obama did when he normalized relations is he took Cuba off the list of state sponsors of terror. Well, guess what? This was a terrorist attack against U.S. diplomats and their families in Cuba. They used a sonic weapon, which is not just could do a lot worse than cause hearing loss. It could cause organ damage. It could cause brain damage. It could hurt their respiration. These people could have died as a result of this. And the idea that the Cuban government is sitting there saying we don't know anything about this is patently absurd. Next to North Korea, this is the most repressive regime, totalitarian regime on the face of the earth. These people were living in Cuban government-owned housing. They were under constant surveillance by Cuban state police. And the idea that the Cuban regime that Barack Obama was coddling for the last couple of years knew nothing about this, was either not involved or had no knowledge of it, is just simply absurd.
Isaac, I understand what President Obama thought, that this personal outreach would maybe speed up the ability for normal relations. But do you think this will actually set us back?
Well, first and foremost, our nation has to do everything we can to protect our diplomats, and obviously our prayers are tremendously with those who are affected. I think that we need to get the rest of the facts. The details are still emerging. It's not clear yet if this was something done by the Cubans, if this was something done, as was mentioned earlier, by a third party like Russia, Paul Manafort's dear friends, as an attempt to attack, harass our diplomats.
I don't know if we can accuse Paul Manafort of this.
That's amazing that you
no,
by
no means are we is anyone tagging him with this. But the point is that the Russians, who obviously have connections to the current administration, or at least certainly evidence thereof, may have been responsible as well.
But even if that's
true, we don't
true,
know these details. So to say that we're going to end the Obama policy after a couple of years and return to the policy that clearly worked so well in its first 60 years to bring us to this point seems a little bit ridiculous.
But President Trump, Mark, talks about leverage and that you need that in sort of deal making, and that we gave it up. Is there a way for us to get some of it back?
Well, yes. I mean, the fact is Barack Obama gave the Cuban government everything they wanted and got nothing in return. I mean, he lifted restrictions on travel and trade that have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the coffers of the Cuban government that were virtually empty. He gave them diplomatic recognition. He sat there, as we saw pictures of, eating popcorn and doing the wave with Raul Castro at a baseball game in Havana, which was a huge PR and financial coup for the Castro regime. So what did we get in return for that? Well, according to Amnesty International, repression in Cuba has dramatically increased since the opening that Barack Obama undertook. Last year, there were, according to Amnesty, an average of 862 arrests and detentions, arbitrary arrests and detentions, every single month in Cuba. This is the most repressive regime in the face of the earth, and it's gotten more repressive since Barack Obama's policies were in place. And by the way, we're looking at Venezuela right now, what's happening there with Castro's ally in Venezuela. They're using the money that they've gotten from the opening to help the Maduro regime repress the Venezuelan people who are trying to rise up and get democracy.
Isaac, I'll give you the last word. I do think, obviously, we have American citizens, diplomats who didn't deserve what has happened to them, and I guess we'll hopefully get more information about them, and of course the Canadian citizen as well. But there's also a lot of innocent people living under these regimes that deserve better as well. And I'll just give you the last word, however you want to close it out.
Absolutely. The people who live under the oppressive regime and the failed economic policies of the Castros in Cuba need help. They need the American ideals exported there, unlike what Mark and what President Trump have said we should do, which is to close off that door and not to give that opportunity to give the people that information. All right. Isaac and Mark, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you. The Google employee that got fired for circulating a memo on diversity is now speaking out. We will